Hello my lovelies, and welcome back to part 2 of my 3-part series on how to start a sketchbook. So let's jump in. So like I said, this is part 2 of my 3-part series. I will link number 1 up here somewhere if I work out how to do so. So feel free to go and check that one out if you haven't seen it yet already. Oh, and I'll link it in the description as well, just in case I can't work out how to do the magic thing. So, as I said, this is part 2 of my 3-part series on how to start a sketchbook. Now, these tips can be absolutely applied to any situation when you're trying to draw but you just can't get through that mental barrier. You know, when you freeze up, you stare at your blank page and you go, I don't know what to draw, I don't know what to draw, and you spend, what, an hour, 2 hours more, longer, just thinking of inspiration. But actually the problem is getting started. So what these tips are for are to kind of get you started and get that ball rolling. So today's episode has 3 tips in there for you, and next week's video will have 4 tips. So do hit the subscribe button and get notified for when I release that video soon. For now, let's jump in with today's tips.
So the first tip I have for you today is to dedicate a book just to messiness. This one might be super easy if you're like I am and have a bit of a sketchbook hoarding problem. Otherwise you can get these books pretty cheaply from your local art store. I think I only paid a couple of pounds, so I imagine a couple of dollars for a set of 3. The paper quality doesn't really matter, it's just going to be full of kind of trial and error and testing out new art supplies anyway, so don't worry about getting anything super fancy. The value of this exercise is to kind of help us get around that need for perfectionism. You know, when you start a new sketchbook and you have that lovely page and you wanna hold yourself to a really high standard, which can get quite detrimental. Sometimes we do need to be a bit chaotic, and if we let ourselves sort of vent on a page with new art supplies, we can kind of release that energy that we have pent up. This messy book can be full of new media attempts, which is great for practice anyway. It can be a place for you to warm up to, so if you're planning a bigger sketch but you don't really want to ruin a new sketchbook or ruin a perfect sketchbook with your new attempts, you can just jump in with your old messy book and try the techniques out there anyway. Plus, the other massive benefit is that it helps us develop new skills, which we then can transfer over to our other books as well. So I definitely recommend this technique for anybody who has an ounce of perfectionism. Let yourself make a mess. It's okay to make a mess, and if you've got a space dedicated to literally making a mess, it kind of helps you release that pressure on yourself to be perfect all the time. So this was pretty much the first time I'd done this for myself and allowed myself to try new techniques, such as painting with this palette knife. I'd never done that before and it was actually super fun, so I'll definitely be using that skill again. So yeah, let me know in the comments below, are you a bit of a perfectionist? Are you actually afraid to try this technique? Do give it a go because it is a lot of fun. So on to tip number 2. This one is to try and avoid using ring-bound sketchbooks. Okay, so a bit controversial, and this isn't to say never use them, because they definitely have their benefits. They're super practical and are great for smaller spaces where a larger hardbound book may not fit when opened fully. What my feeling is that they are too forgiving and end up letting us tear out pages that we don't like, which I think is kind of a bad habit. One of my art mantras is to kind of embrace the mistakes that we make, and every mistake is a lesson learned. So it's also a reminder for our future selves to see how far we've come. Plus, what happens if we tear out all of our sketchbook pages? It's not even a sketchbook anymore. So it's just being okay with making mistakes and having ugly pages. Hardback books kind of force us to remember that because it's not very easy to take out pages that we don't like. So once again, my friends, it's all about just embracing the mistakes and letting yourself learn. You're allowed to learn, and making mistakes is a big part of that. So if you can only have ring-bound sketchbooks, that's absolutely fine. Just try to avoid tearing out the pages if you can. So moving on to our final tip for this video. Tip number 3 today is to try and mimic a sketchbook page. So this one does come with a bit of a warning, but I will get to that in a minute. So what I mean by this is to replicate a page that you already like. So you can do this by looking at old sketchbooks and choosing a page that you actually really liked from before and to just do a new version. So this is taking your old work and drawing it again. It's a really excellent way to see how your style has developed. Plus, you can't really go wrong. If you like the page before, chances are you're going to like it again if you do it very similar. So an alternative way of doing this is to mimic a sketchbook page from an artist that you admire. But, and this is a big but, please, please, please don't do this without permission, and certainly don't copy the original artist's work directly. The simplest thing to do, and it's the best way to respect the artist that you might be learning from, is to approach them and just ask them, is it okay if I take what you've drawn and kind of do my own version of it? The absolute worst thing that's going to happen is that artist is going to say no, and provided you don't then go and ignore them and carry on sketching your own versions of it, you're not really going to get into trouble for asking. It's also worth double checking that you're allowed to actually share this on your own social media, for example. You know, the original artist might not be particularly happy if you then go on to share it and it comes across like you're claiming it as your own work. So, I mean, for example, if someone asked me if they could learn from a sketchbook page I'd drawn, I'd be okay with it provided that they kept it kind of for personal reference, or if they absolutely must share it, which I would be concerned about them kind of ignoring my wishes. If they absolutely must share it, then a bare minimum would be to reference me in their caption somewhere. It's just to say that this work that I've drawn is not originally mine, or that I have been inspired by an artist, and I mean, I'd be quite honoured if someone said that they were inspired by me, you know, so I think you'll find that some artists will feel the same way. But of course, these views are entirely my own, they don't represent anyone else, and I wouldn't want anyone to assume that what I thought is what everyone else thinks, because not many people necessarily agree with me. They would say try and keep to being original and not to steal anything, whilst I don't think this is stealing if you're just learning different techniques. And I maintain that you don't really own a style, whilst everyone holds a pencil slightly differently. Even if you're drawing directly from someone, you're going to be doing it in your own way. Just always be cautious and always be considerate, and say if you've adopted a style from someone, or if you've adopted a specific aspect of your drawing from someone, it's just a nice thing to do, to say that you've learned from this particular artist. Plus, if you're just mimicking a page, you don't have to do anything exactly the same as the original piece. You have more sort of leeway if you're drawing from your own work, then you can do it exactly the same. But one way to kind of respect the original artist would be to draw a different pose, to draw it in different colours, to put your own spin on it. I guess the message that I'm trying to get across here is that if you are using other artists to learn from, whilst it's okay, just always, always, always respect the wishes of the original artist. Make sure you approach them and ask them. It can be quite daunting, especially if you've never spoken to them before, to say, look, I really love your work. Is it okay if I try to replicate this page in my own sketchbook? Because I think it will really help me improve in my own style. Always respect the original artist's wishes. If that person says, do you know what, no, I'd rather you didn't, please don't, then don't do it. Or if they say, yes, but, then make sure you follow their conditions. It's all about being respectful and using it as a learning opportunity rather than a kind of a stealing opportunity, which obviously you should be doing anyway. I just redrew my own work here, and it was actually really fun to try out my new style.
So, there you have it. Those are 3 extra tips on how to help you get started on a book, or to help you get through that kind of creative block. If you fancy checking out all 11 of the tips that I've got here in these videos, I have written a blog post about it, and I'll link it in the description below. But I would love to hear from you. Are there any tips that you found in this video that you really can't wait to try? Do let me know in the comments below. I also have a Patreon in case you want to help support me or this channel. I'll link that also in the description below. So as always, subscribe if you're not, hit the like button if you enjoy this content, and I can't wait to see you for the next video.